I don't think you're the person authorized to make this deal.
Then you just rejected the person holding your $180 million.
Is Rains. This table is for principals only. The words reached Celia Rains before the leather chair did. She stood at the north end of the private dining room inside the Marrow House, a restored Baltimore bank-turned-deal club, with her Navy portfolio tucked under one arm and her name printed on the seating card beside the lead investor's place setting. She had flown in to review a $180 million Series C term sheet her fund had already soft-circled. She had the right to be there. Even Whitcomb had decided otherwise before he checked the card. He was already smiling, which made it worse. Not warm, not confused. Polished, with one hand resting on the back of the chair meant for her, as if he had caught a junior employee wandering past the velvet rope. Celia looked at the card, then at him. That says Rains Capital. It does, Evan said, and I'm sure someone from Rains is joining us. I'm Celia Rains. A small pause moved around the table. Not silence, exactly. The CFO stopped unfolding his napkin. The counsel from the mezzanine lender glanced down at his phone. Across from them, a young associate with a narrow braid over one shoulder looked up from the stack of closing folders and kept looking. Evan's smile stayed fixed. He was 48, ill at the temples in a way that looked negotiated with a stylist, wearing the kind of casual blazer men chose when they wanted to seem too busy to care about being expensive. His company, Valon Systems, did warehouse routing software and talked about dignity and labor in every deck. Their largest potential investor, Celia's fund, had spent 6 weeks inside the numbers. Right, Evan said. I meant the decision partner. Celia let the phrase sit there, decision partner. It had arrived dressed as process, but she knew the shape beneath it. I am the decision partner. The CFO, a pale man named Grant Sellers, cleared his throat but did not speak. He had spent 2 due diligence calls saying Celia's point and Celia's concern as if her name were a useful tool, not a person attached to a chair. Evan gave a soft laugh meant to invite the others into it. I don't want to start this on the wrong foot. We're expecting Richard from your office. Richard Leong is my operating advisor, Celia said. He reviews logistics contracts. He doesn't vote the check. That wasn't my understanding. It was in the calendar invite, the allocation memo, and the voting rider your counsel received on Tuesday. The associate with the braid shifted one folder closer to herself. Celia noticed the motion because she noticed everything in rooms like this. Who touched paper, who avoided eye contact, gave themselves permission to rewrite the facts before asking one question. The room still smelled faintly of old brass and lemon oil. Above them, the former teller windows had been turned into shadow boxes filled with antique ledgers no one was meant to read. Evan tapped the chair once with his fingers. Look, Celia, this is a sensitive conversation. We're discussing cap table rights, board observer language, founder control. I'm not comfortable having someone at the table whose authority I can't verify in the moment. Her skin warmed at the back of her neck. She wore her hair cropped close, the silver thread at her left temple visible by choice, not accident. Her mother used to say, never let a room make you reach for proof before they reached for manners. But her mother had never sat across from a founder who needed her money and still wanted her to enter through a side door. Celia opened the portfolio and slid out one page. Not the whole packet. One page was enough. Here is the signed authorization from Rains Capital's investment committee. My name is on the binding approval line. Your counsel has the same version. Evan did not pick it up. He looked toward Grant instead. Did legal confirm this? Grant's mouth opened, then closed. I saw a version. A version, Evan repeated, relieved by the smallest fog. Celia kept her hand flat beside the page. There is no alternate version. The mezzanine counsel, a woman with tortoiseshell glasses, leaned forward. For clarity, the lead investor's authority matters before we begin negotiation. We can take 5 minutes to verify. We're not taking 5 minutes, Evan said, still polite enough to sound reasonable to anyone who wanted him to be. You're protecting the integrity of the process. Celia almost smiled at that. Integrity in his mouth became a locked service entrance. He turned to the host station near the paneled door. Could you bring in an additional chair by the wall for Ms. Rains? Once Richard arrives, we'll loop her in where appropriate. The young associate's pen stopped moving. Celia looked at the wall. There was indeed space beside the credenza, between the coffee service and the coat stand, where an extra chair would make her visible but not equal. She had seen versions of that chair in hotel conference rooms, hospital boards, municipal briefings, and one awful school finance meeting where a superintendent had thanked her for community input after accepting her bond analysis without attribution. She did not raise her voice. "I won't sit off table for a deal my firm is leading." Evan's expression thinned. For the first time, the charm had to work. "No one is disrespecting you. You just asked staff to place me against a wall. I asked for a practical accommodation." For whom his eyes flicked to the others. There it was, the quick inventory of who might still be managed. For the people who need to know they're speaking with authorized parties. Celia gathered the authorization page but did not return it to her portfolio. "And verify it. We will, when Richard gets here." "Richard is not coming." Grant finally looked up. "He's not. He was never scheduled to attend in person." Celia turned the seating card so the printed names faced the table. "Your team confirmed me as lead at 7:42 this morning." Evan's jaw did not tighten. He was too practiced for that. Instead, he reached for a folder and opened it to the agenda, pretending the paper had summoned his attention. "I think we should proceed with the company presentation. Rains can observe until we settle the authority question." "Observe," Celia repeated. The associate with the braid lowered her eyes to the top folder, where a blue tab marked Investor Consent stuck out half an inch farther than the rest. Celia saw her thumb press lightly against it, not opening it, not hiding it, preserving the place. Celia understood the choice in front of her. She could perform patience and let them use her restraint as consent. She could show him the full voting packet and reward the insult with access. Or she could make the smallest formal move available, the kind that did not announce power but changed the floor under the room. She took her phone from her bag and placed it face up beside the water glass. "Before any presentation begins, I'm requesting that Valen note on the meeting record that the lead investor was denied her contracted seat pending a verification the company declined to perform." Evan gave another laugh, shorter this time. "There's no meeting record. This is dinner." Mezzanine counsel reached into her briefcase and removed a slim recorder with a white evidence label already dated and initialed. "Actually," she said, "the financing conference began when the parties convened at the scheduled location. Firm records all negotiated covenant sessions with notice. It was in the pre-read." Evan looked at the recorder as if it had been rude enough to arrive without a reservation. Celia did not touch her water. "Then please add my request." The counsel pressed one button and stated the time. Evan's smile disappeared only at the edges. "Still, fine. Let the record show Ms. Raines is choosing not to participate." "No," Celia said. "Let it show I am ready to participate from the seat assigned to the lead investor, and the company is refusing to recognize my authority while accepting the benefit of my firm's pending commitment." The associate with the braid wrote that down word for word. Evan closed the folder. "If this is how Raines Capital wants to begin a partnership, maybe we need to revisit whether there is a cultural fit." Celia picked up her portfolio. The old bank vault door at the back of the room reflected a thin strip of light across the table, cutting through the place cards, the unsigned term sheets, the untouched bread plates. For 6 weeks, Valen had chased her signature. In 6 minutes, Evan had shown her what their governance would cost every person without a preferred chair. She looked at the mezzanine counsel. "Please, note one more thing." The woman nodded. "Raines Capital is placing its $180 million commitment under immediate internal hold pending authority verification, meeting conduct review, and confirmation that no company officer attempted to misstate investor participation." Grant's napkin slipped from his lap. Evan stood halfway. "You can't just vanish funding because of a seating misunderstanding." Celia slid the authorization page back into her portfolio. "I didn't vanish anything. You refused to verify the person authorized to release it." The recorder's red light kept blinking. Grant did not move for several seconds after Celia said the word hold. His fingers stayed open above his empty lap, as if the napkin had fallen through a trapdoor instead of landing beside his shoe. Evan recovered first. Men like him often did. He had built a company on routing confusion into useful paths, and now he tried to route the room around what had just happened. Let's not turn a procedural hiccup into theater. Celia remained standing at the head of the table. The authorization page was back in her portfolio, but the request had already entered the record. That mattered more than any page she could waive. Paper could be ignored when a room wanted ignorance. A recorded refusal made ignorance work harder. The mezzanine counsel looked at Evan over her glasses. For the record, Mr. Whitcomb, do you intend to verify Ms. Raines's authority now? Evan's attention sharpened on the recorder. I intend to continue the scheduled financing discussion with all properly verified parties. That does not answer the question. It answers the business issue. The young associate with the braid wrote something in the margin of her folder and stopped when Grant glanced at her. Her name card read Maya Dorsey, corporate associate. Celia had seen her on one diligence call, mostly muted always, the person who found page numbers before partners finished asking. She had also been the only one who noticed the investor consent tab before Evan tried to pretend verification was unavailable. Celia turned to Grant. You said you saw a version of the authorization. Which version? I don't want to misstate anything. That would be a good principle to start using now. A faint cough came from the host near the door. No one smiled. The Marrow House servers had the trained stillness of people paid to disappear while powerful guests behaved badly, but this room had grown too specific for invisibility. Grant reached for the stack beside his plate, then changed his mind and touched his phone instead. The documents are in the data room. Legal manages access. Maya looked down again. Evan caught it. Maya, there's no need to dig through closing materials during dinner. I wasn't, she said. Her voice was soft but not vague. Celia recognized the difference. Soft was volume, vague was surrender. Evan leaned into civility. I appreciate everyone's commitment to process, but our concern is that Raines Capital has presented multiple points of contact, and founder governance cannot be negotiated with someone whose final authority is unclear. Celia heard the shift. Not that he had failed to check. Not that he had assumed Richard held the vote because Richard was an older Asian man with a title that sounded technical and safe. The wrong story had gained a suit jacket. Multiple points of contact, final authority unclear, founder governance. He was building a file he could send later. The mezzanine counsel asked, what is the basis for saying final authority is unclear? Our communications have been inconsistent, Evan said. Which communications? Various. Celia looked at him for a long moment. Name one. Evan's smile returned in a thinner, lawyer-fed version. I'm not going to litigate email history at a dinner table. This is no longer dinner. He did a record. That landed somewhere near Grant. He looked toward the vault door, then at Maya's folder. The pre-close packet had Celia listed as approval signatory, he said. Evan's head turned slowly. Grant, I'm saying what I saw. You saw an internal draft. Maya lifted her eyes. It was not internal. The room found her all at once. She kept one hand over the folder, not clutching it, just holding the place as if her palm could keep the paper puff from being revised by force of personality. Evan spoke her name the way a manager did when kindness had become a warning. Maya, she swallowed. The investor consent packet was uploaded to the lender portal yesterday at 4:18 p.m. It included the Raines voting rider. Ms. Raines is the named investment committee designee for this transaction. Grant closed his eyes for half a beat. Evan said, that portal is not the controlling source. The mezzanine counsel turned the recorder a fraction toward him. Then what is? Our counsel will confirm. I'm counsel for the mezzanine facility, the woman said. Our condition precedent includes lead equity confirmation. If the lead investor is placed off-table after producing authority, that affects our own risk review. Evan's hand flattened on the agenda. No one placed anyone off-table. I requested seating while we resolved confusion. Celia thought of the extra chair by the credenza, of the coffee urn breathing steam against the wall. She thought of every elegant room that believed the harm disappeared if the word practical came before it. Her anger had become a narrow tool, not hot anymore, not cold either. Useful. You asked staff to seat me away from the negotiation, she said. You refused to review the authorization. Then you said I could observe, and you responded by threatening the financing. I responded by preserving my firm's rights. Evan turned to the others. This is exactly my concern. If every hard conversation becomes an accusation, how do we build a working relationship? There it was. Cooperation, professionalism, cultural fit. Language that made the person objecting sound like the risk, while the original decision slipped into the carpet. Celia's phone buzzed once on the table. She did not look at it. Maya did. The motion was tiny, but Evan noticed again. Is there something you need to add? Maya's mouth opened, then she looked at Grant. Celia saw the calculation move through her face. Associate math. Rent. Loans. motion. The partner who would hear about this by morning. The founder whose company might close or collapse. The woman at the head of the table who had been told to sit by the coffee service. Grant gave her nothing. He pulled the blue-tabbed folder toward her. There is a signed meeting protocol in here. Evan laughed once too loud for the size of the room. A meeting protocol does not override company judgment. No, Maya said. But it says all lead financing parties are entitled to equal table participation during covenant negotiation, and any challenge to authority has to be resolved by document review before substantive discussion begins. The mezzanine counsel held out her hand. May I see that? Maya hesitated. Evan said, do not pass privileged materials across the table. Maya's hand froze on the folder. It was distributed in the shared close binder. It was prepared by our counsel. It was marked shared. His voice lowered. Maya, be careful. The warning carried more than the words. It carried performance reviews, staffing assignments, the quiet ways a young lawyer could be made to regret accuracy. Celia finally picked up her phone. Hey. The message on the screen was from Richard Leong. Phelan board observer called me. Evan told them you refuse to attend unless given unilateral control. Want me to join by video? Celia felt the old brass smell of the room press closer. She turned the phone so only the mezzanine counsel could see the message. Now we have a second problem. The counsel read it and exhaled through her nose. Misstatement to governance. Evan looked between them. What are you showing her? Celia placed the phone face down. She had made one mistake already. She had assumed Evan's insult would stay inside the room long enough to be corrected there. He had moved faster, building a record outside the record. She looked at Maya. Do not hand over anything you are not permitted to share. But if that protocol is in the shared close binder, please state on the record that it exists and where it can be independently accessed. Maya's shoulders changed, not relaxing, just settling into the cost. The protocol exists in Binder 3, Tab 12, uploaded to the shared lender portal yesterday at 4:18 p.m. It can be accessed by Veylan, Rains Capital, and Mezzanine Counsel. The recorder caught every word. Evan stepped back from his chair. This meeting is adjourned. The Mezzanine Counsel said, You cannot adjourn a financing conference to avoid a preservation request. I can adjourn my company's dinner. Celia slid her portfolio strap over her shoulder. Then let the record show Veylan terminated the session after being asked to verify the lead investor's authority and after a potential misstatement to board observers was identified. Evan pointed toward the recorder. Turn that off. The counsel did not. Bent to retrieve his napkin. But when he came up, his face had lost its prepared neutrality. He looked at Celia as if he had finally understood that $180 million did not disappear. It waited behind a door he no longer controlled. Maya kept her hand on Binder 3. Celia looked once at the empty chair by the wall, then at the chair with her name still printed beside it. She did not sit in either one. Instead, she opened her phone and sent Richard a 2-line reply. Joined by video. Say nothing until asked. Then she added a formal preservation request to Rains Capital's legal channel, naming the portal logs, the meeting audio, the seating cards, and all communications to board observers after 6 p.m. When she pressed send, the small sound was almost swallowed by the old building's ventilation. Almost. Richard appeared on the wall monitor 90 seconds later, framed by the dim light of his home office and a shelf of warehouse scale models he used when founders pretended logistics was just software with boxes attached. He wore a gray sweatshirt, not a suit. Celia saw Evan register that too, the casualness becoming another fact he might try to use if the record did not already have teeth. Richard. Evan said too quickly, I'm glad you could join. There seems to be confusion about your role. Richard blinked once. He was in his 60s with a steady face and the practiced patience of a man who had learned not every invitation deserved a full sentence. There is no confusion on my end. Grant had moved closer to the sideboard, phone in hand, angled away from the recorder. Maya remained seated, Binder 3 under her palm. Mezzanine Counsel, whose name Celia had finally caught from her card, Ellen Park, stood beside the recorder like a referee no one had hired but everyone now needed. Evan tried again. Understanding was that you would be representing Rains Capital in final governance negotiations. No, Richard said. I advised Celia on operations exposure. She represents Rains Capital. On this transaction, on every transaction she chooses to lead, a server entered with a silver tray of oysters and saw all of them standing around untouched contracts. He retreated with professional grace, leaving behind a breath of brine and horseradish that made the old bankroom feel suddenly ridiculous. Celia had not eaten since noon. Her stomach reminded her at the worst possible time, a small human complaint beneath a very expensive failure. Evan heard the answer and changed terrain. Then perhaps we need to understand why Rain sent multiple signals. We received input from you on warehouse labor modeling, from Celia on governance, from Council on side letter language. That creates uncertainty. Richard looked toward Celia through the screen. Do you want me to answer that? Please. That is diligence, Richard said, not uncertainty. Maya's pen moved. Evan's nostrils flared, barely. You are trying to protect founder control from late-stage investor overreach. Celia recognized the sentence now. It sounded rehearsed, because it had probably been sent to someone already. Founder control was a fair concern in general. She had defended founders against predatory terms herself, but Evan had not asked to review a protective provision. He had removed a black woman from the decision seat, and then wrapped the removal in governance language. Ellen Park turned a page in her legal pad. Mr. Whitcomb, before the session adjourns, I need a direct answer. Did you tell any Veyland board, observer, or director that Miss Haynes refused to attend unless given unilateral control? Evan's gaze moved to Celia's phone. I characterized the behavior accurately. That is not a direct answer. I said the investor representative was making participation conditional on control. Richard leaned closer to his camera. That is false. Evan pointed at the screen as if distance had made Richard safer to interrupt. You were not in the room. I received Celia's message after you made your call. I reviewed the calendar, the protocol, and the authorization while joining. Its statement is false. Grant rubbed his forehead. Evan. That one word carried months of closed-door tension. Celia heard it and understood something she had missed earlier. Grant had not been neutral because he believed Evan. He had been neutral because he was tired of losing private battles and had not decided whether this one was worth becoming public over. Evan turned on him. Do you have something useful to contribute? Grant looked at the recorder, then at Maya. Yes. I want it noted that finance did not authorize any communication, implying Rain sought unilateral control. Evan's face hardened. You don't speak for the company. I speak for the finance function. You speak when I ask you to. The words landed differently than he intended. Dramatic, not cinematic, just ugly in their plainness. The room did not need a moral lecture. It had heard the management style behind the pitch deck. Maya stopped writing. Mr. The protocol also says no party can begin substantive renegotiation after a lead investor authority dispute until all shared records are preserved. Evan looked at her like he had forgotten employees could read. You are not counsel of record. No, she said. Her voice thinned but held. I'm the person who assembled the closing binder. Ellen Park asked, was binder 3 altered after upload? Maya's eyes flicked toward Grant. Grant answered before she had to. Not by finance. Evan snapped, enough. Celia watched Maya's hand tighten on the folder. She knew the next move. Evan would remove the witness from the room, then call it personnel management. He would say Maya was overwhelmed, junior, mistaken, maybe emotional. The wrong story would look neat by morning. Celia made her first imperfect decision of the night. Maya, she said, take a photo of the upload log. Ellen's head turned Celia. Maya froze. The mistake hit Celia almost as soon as she spoke. She had put a junior associate at risk in front of her CEO. Her anger had aimed for preservation and struck a person who did not have her protection yet. Celia corrected herself. No, don't do that. She looked directly at Maya. I'm sorry. Do not take any action outside your role. Maya's breath came back shallow. Celia turned to Ellen. What can be requested without putting her in the middle? Ellen's answer was immediate. A formal portal preservation notice to all authorized custodians. No copying by individual employees. No off-channel transfers. Send it. I will. Evan gave a bitter laugh. You're all behaving as if there's fraud here. No, Celia said. We're behaving as if the record matters before someone rewrites it. Her phone buzzed again, this time with an automated acknowledgement from Rain's Capital Legal. Preservation request received. Transaction hold active. External counsel standby. That was the irreversible line, not the insult, not even the off-table chair. The deal had moved from negotiation to preservation. Every document now had a shadow. Every version had a timestamp. Grant's phone rang. He looked at the screen and went still. It's Denise. Evan's irritation sharpened into alarm. Do not answer that here. Celia knew the name. Denise Halpern, Valen's independent board chair, a retired supply chain executive who had insisted on the board observer language in the first place. Celia had liked her in the 2 brief calls they had shared. Direct, unsentimental, allergic to founder mythology. Grant answered. "Denise," he said, voice low. "Yes, I'm in the room." Everyone could hear the tinny edge of a woman's voice, not the words, but enough to know she was not calling about dessert. Grant looked at Evan while he listened. Then he looked at Celia. "Yes, she's here." Evan stepped toward him. Grant raised one hand, palm out. A small rebellion, but in that room small had become measurable. "No," Grant said into the phone. "Richard Leong is on video. Celia Raines is present." She did not refuse to attend. Evan's mouth opened. Grant kept going. "The funding is on hold." The old ventilation kicked on above the vault door, pushing cool air across the untouched term sheets. Celia felt it at her wrists where her pulse had been working too hard. Grant listened again, then said, "Understood." He ended the call and set the phone on the table with care, as if sudden movement might break what was left of the evening. He stared at him. What did she say? Grant looked at Ellen's recorder before answering. "The board is convening an emergency governance call in 20 minutes. Denise instructed that no closing documents be modified, moved, or deleted. She wants all parties on the call." Evan's face rearranged itself into disbelief. "This is absurd." Maya lifted her pen again, but her hand trembled now. Celia saw it. The price had arrived for someone who had only told the truth about a binder. She could not erase that, but she could name the protection before the room forgot. "Then please add one condition to Raines Capital's participation," Celia said. Ellen nodded toward the recorder. "No retaliation against any employee or advisor who identifies, preserves, or authenticates shared closing materials tonight." Maya did not look up, but her pen stopped shaking. Evan pushed back from the table. "You don't get to dictate internal personnel matters." Celia met his eyes. "No. Listen, I get to decide whether my firm funds a company that punishes people for accurate records." Richard's image on the monitor held still, his face grave. The chair with Celia's name remained untouched. The one by the wall had never been brought in. Between them, the financing packet lay open to a deal that had not died yet but had stopped trusting the hands around it. Ellen pressed the recorder button again and stated the preservation notice would be issued to all parties. This time, no one called it dinner. The emergency governance call began with the sound of chairs scraping in different rooms. Denise Halpern appeared first on the wall monitor beside Richard's video square, her silver hair pulled back, reading glasses low on her nose, the expression of a woman who had spent a career watching inventory systems fail because someone hid a small error until it became freight. 2 other board members joined with cameras off. Elon's outside counsel joined from what looked like a car, his face lit blue by a dashboard screen. Celia finally sat, but not because Evan had granted it. She pulled out the chair with her name on it, set her portfolio on the table, and lowered herself into the place she had been assigned before the room tried to make the assignment negotiable. The leather was cold through her suit jacket. Across from her, Maya kept binder 3 closed beneath both hands. Denise did not open with greetings. "I want the record clean. Celia Raines, are you present as the authorized lead representative for Raines Capital on the proposed Series C financing?" "Yes." "Richard Leong, are you present as an operating advisor without voting authority?" "Yes," Richard said. "Evan, did you tell me Ms. Raines refused to participate unless granted unilateral control?" Evan had taken his seat again, but he sat forward, elbows near the agenda, posture arranged for battle. "I reported that the investor was making participation conditional on control language that raised serious founder governance concerns." Denise looked down, wrote something, then looked back at the camera. "That is not what I asked." The outside counsel cleared his throat. "Denise, we should be cautious about characterizing live discussions before reviewing materials." "Agreed," Denise said. "That is why I asked a fact question." Evan's mouth pressed into a line. "She refused to proceed unless we recognized her authority." Celia kept her hands folded on the table. Her father had been a city bus mechanic who could listen to an engine miss once and tell whether the problem was fuel, timing, or a driver pretending not to hear it. Celia had not inherited his hands. She could barely change a wiper blade without watching a video twice, but she had inherited his distrust of people who called a noise normal because fixing it cost money. "I refuse to proceed from a chair against the wall," she said. Denise's eyes moved to Evan. A chair against the wall. Ellen Park played back a short segment from the recorder, just enough. Evan's voice, clean and unmistakable, asked for an additional chair by the wall and said Celia could be looped in where appropriate. No one filled the space after it. The recording did enough. One of the camera-off board members spoke, a man with a dry Midwestern voice. Even, why was the lead investor not seated at the table? Because her authority was unclear. Denise asked, "Did you review the authorization she provided?" It was not the appropriate verification channel. "Did you ask counsel to review it?" "We needed Richard." Richard answered before anyone could invite him. "No one needed me for that." Celia looked at him and almost smiled. Almost. He had once told her he liked advising her, because she did not confuse volume with leverage. Tonight she had come close. Still, her instruction to Maya still sat in her mouth like something too bitter to swallow. She would have to apologize again when it no longer sounded like strategy. Denise turned to Grant. Finance status. Grant had placed his phone beside his water glass. He looked older than he had 20 minutes earlier. Bain Capital's $180 million commitment is under internal hold. Mezzanine Council has signaled risk review. The closing timeline is no longer viable for Friday unless the hold is lifted, and I do not see a basis for that tonight. Evan stared at him. "You're supposed to present options, surrender." Grant's voice stayed flat. "Those are the options." Maya's pen made one soft tick against paper. Celia heard it because she was listening for signs of fracture now. Not just Evan's, everyone's. Denise said, "Maya Dorsey, I understand you assembled the closing binder." Maya looked at Evan before answering. Denise saw it. "You are not being asked to disclose privileged material. I'm asking whether the shared lender portal contained a meeting protocol addressing authority challenges." Maya's voice was steadier than her hands. "Yes. Binder 3, tab 12, uploaded yesterday at 4:18 p.m. Was Miss Baines identified in the investor consent packet?" "Yes. As what? Investment committee designee for Rains Capital." Evan leaned back. "She's a junior associate under pressure." Celia felt the sentence do what it was built to do. Shrink the witness until her facts looked borrowed. Maya's face closed, not in fear alone, but in humiliation. Celia knew that look. It was what happened when someone used your rank as an eraser. Denise's tone cooled. "Her level does not alter the portal log." The outside counsel finally spoke with purpose. "I recommend a temporary document freeze, independent review of the meeting record, and no further substantive negotiation until authority and communications are reconciled." Evan's laugh came out rough. "So we are freezing my company because an investor took offense?" "No," Denise said. "We are freezing closing activity because the board may have received inaccurate information during financing." There it was. The not full victory. Something more dangerous to Evan because it was procedural and plain. Celia's phone buzzed with a message from her younger brother, Malik, who never texted during business hours unless their aunt had ignored her blood pressure pills again. "You still coming by Mom's place tonight?" The sink is doing that knock again. She stared at the words longer than she meant to. The sink, the little brick row house, the cabinet under it, smelling like damp wood and peppermint cleaner. She had promised to stop by after dinner, before the meeting had become a hearing with oysters abandoned outside the door. Yet, life outside rooms like this did not pause just because people inside them were discovering consequences. She typed back, "Late. Don't let her put a bucket under it and call that plumbing." Malik replied with 3 laughing emojis, and then, she already did. Celia put the phone down, but the small ordinary exchange steadied her more than the hold notice had. And it reminded her what she was not willing to become for a deal. She would not punish Maya for being useful. She would not let Evan turn procedure into a broom. She would not confuse winning the room with repairing the harm. Denise continued. Immediate actions. Closing documents are frozen. Portal logs preserved. Communications to board observers from 6 p.m. forward preserved. Deb Dorsey is not to be removed from this matter or contacted about her statements without counsel present. Grant, you will coordinate with outside counsel. Ellen, please send your notice. Evan stood. You're undermining founder authority in front of investors. Denise removed her glasses. Founder authority is not immunity. For once, Evan had no polished answer ready. Celia looked toward the vault door at the back of the room. Its steel wheel had been fixed in place as decoration, no longer opening anything, just reminding guests of money once locked behind metal and procedure. The image suited the night too well. Valen still had a company. Evan still had a title. Film. The funding had not vanished into drama. It had been sealed behind a process he could no longer charm open. Denise looked directly at Celia through the screen. Ms. Raines, will Raines Capital participate in the independent review? Celia thought of Friday's closing, her partner's patience, the founders who did listen, the employees at Veylan whose paychecks did not deserve to become collateral damage. She also thought of the chair by the wall. Yes, she said, but the hold stays until the review answers 3 questions. Denise nodded once. Name them. Celia placed her palm on the table beside her untouched water. Who had authority, who knew it, and who chose to say otherwise? Maya wrote the sentence down. Next time, Evan did not tell her to stop. The review did not happen in one clean motion. It arrived in pieces over the next 46 hours, each one smaller than outrage and harder to dismiss. First came the portal log. Ellen Park's preservation notice forced Veylan's outside counsel to export access records before anyone could clean up duplicate folders. 3. Tab 12 had been uploaded at 4:18 p.m. the day before the dinner. Evan had opened it at 4:26. Grant had opened it at 4:31. Maya had uploaded the final version after outside counsel approved the shared label. B. The investor consent packet identified Celia as Raines Capital's investment committee designee in 3 places, not 1. Second came the board communication. Evan had called Denise at 6:19 p.m., 3 minutes after asking for the chair by the wall. He had told her the Raines representative was resisting founder protections and trying to take control of the negotiation. He had not said Celia's name until Denise asked. A. He had not said Celia was already printed on the seating chart. He had not said she had offered authorization for review. Third came the seating record, which sounded minor until it did not. The Marrow House host, a thin man named Luis with a white jacket and tired eyes, provided a statement through management. Veylan's executive assistant had sent the final seating chart at noon. Celia Raines was assigned to the lead investor chair. At 6:10, Evan had asked whether the Raines woman had arrived and then told Luis to hold a side chair in case the real partner came late. Luis had not liked the phrase. He had not challenged it either. By Friday morning, the original closing date, Celia was not in a champagne conference room signing final wires. She was at her mother's row house in West Baltimore, kneeling under the kitchen sink with a flashlight between her teeth while Malik handed her the wrong wrench for the second time. That is not the adjustable one, she said around the flashlight. Said the silver one. They are all silver. Her mother, Gloria Raines, sat at the kitchen table in a robe and slippers, pretending not to supervise. For somebody who moves all that money, you two cannot identify a wrench. Celia reached out from under the cabinet. Malik put the right tool in her palm. The pipe knocked once when the water kicked on upstairs, a dull sound through old walls. She tightened the bracket the way a plumber on a video had shown her, then waited. No knock. Gloria gave one approving hum. Look at that. Funding secured. Malik laughed too loudly because he had been waiting for permission to mention it. Celia slid out from under the sink with dust in her hair and a cramp in her shoulder. You okay? He asked. That is not an answer. It is in finance. Her mother set down her tea. It is not my kitchen. Celia wiped her hands on a towel and looked at the window over the sink. Glass held a faint reflection of her face, older than she felt and younger than the exhaustion in her bones. She had been right to place the hold. She had been right to demand protection for Maya. But she had also nearly asked a junior associate to take a photo that could have cost her job. The fact that Celia had corrected herself did not erase the impulse. Got angry, Celia said. Malik leaned against the counter. Sounds like you had cause. Cause is not permission to spend somebody else's risk. Gloria's expression softened in a way that annoyed Celia because it meant she had said something true enough to be heard. Then fix that part too. Her phone rang before she could answer. Denise Halpern. Celia stepped into the narrow back porch where old paint flaked from the railing and the alley smelled of wet brick. Celia Raines. Denise did not waste words. Preliminary review is complete enough for board action. We found material misstatement to board observers, failure to follow the authority challenge protocol, and retaliatory language toward an employee witness. What action? Even is being removed from closing authority pending full investigation, not terminated. Well, not yet. The board is appointing Grant as interim transaction lead with outside counsel oversight. Celia watched a sparrow hop along the alley fence, then vanish behind a trash bin. And Maya, protected in writing. No staffing change, no performance action, no contact without counsel. I will say plainly that your condition made that easier to formalize. Celia accepted the relief but did not let it become pride. Good. Grant wants to know whether Raines will reopen the financing conversation under those terms. Celia almost answered as an investor first. Her firm had spent time and money. Valan's product worked. The warehouse pilots had reduced missed loads for customers who could not afford elegant failure. A collapse would hurt more people than Evan. The open conversation could not be a reset button. Resets helped the people who controlled the first draft. I will join a review session, Celia said. No closing. Not today. Denise was quiet for a moment. What do you need before closing becomes possible? Independent counsel verifies the record. The board issues a written correction to everyone who received Evan's statement. Valan adopts a lead party authority protocol with enforcement, not just language in a binder, and Maya receives witness protection in the transaction minutes. That is a lot. It is less than $180 million. Denise gave a dry sound that might have been respect. I will send the session notice. Celia ended the call and stood on the porch a moment longer. Inside, Malik was telling their mother he had done most of the plumbing. Gloria was letting him lie because it pleased him. Celia looked down at her hands, the faint crescent of grime under one nail, the towel lint clinging to her sleeve. The deal had not vanished. It had been taken apart to see which joints had been knocking before the whole house learned the sound. Then she went back inside. Her phone displayed the new calendar invite. Independent review session, Valan Systems. Today, 3 p.m., she accepted it, then set the phone beside the repaired sink. The independent review session took place in Valan's actual office, not the Marrow House. Celia preferred it that way. Restaurants softened power with candlelight and polished wood. Offices told on people. Valan occupied 2 floors of a converted garment warehouse near the harbor, all exposed beams, glass conference rooms, and murals of delivery routes painted like bright veins across brick. Engineers passed with badges swinging from lanyards. A customer support team worked behind a half wall where a supervisor kept one eye on live shipment alerts. Somewhere deeper in the building, a printer jammed and complained in 3 sharp beeps. The conference room was called Loading Bay because founders loved naming rooms after work other people did. Celia noticed a wall display showing delayed outbound tickets from a regional grocery distributor. Real customers, real routes, real workers waiting on software that did not care how elegant the cap table looked. Grant was already inside when she arrived. So were Denise, Ellen Park, outside counsel, and a labor operations advisor from the board. Evan was not at the table. That absence had weight, but not enough to feel like justice yet. Maya sat near the far end with a Valan attorney beside her. She wore the same narrow braid, a cream blouse, and the careful expression of someone told she was protected, but not yet convinced protection could survive Monday. Celia paused beside her chair. Maya looked up. I owe you an apology that is not part of the record, Celia said. At dinner I asked you to take a photo of the portal log. I corrected it, but I should not have put that risk on you in the first place. Maya's attorney glanced at her, but Maya answered for herself. Thank you, I mean it, I know. Maya's eyes moved once to the others. She also knew where the log was. That does not make it yours to carry alone. Something in Maya's face eased by a small degree. Not trust, maybe room for it later. Denise opened the session. Today is not a renegotiation. It is a verification review. The board has removed Evan Whitcomb from transaction authority pending investigation. Grant Sellers is interim transaction lead. Any proposal to resume closing must address the conduct, the communication failure, and the control weakness that allowed a known authorization to be challenged without review. Grant gave a short nod. He looked tired but present. And the kind of present that came after a person stopped defending the least honest version of events. Outside counsel displayed the portal log on the screen. Celia saw timestamps, names, access events, export IDs. Dry columns. Beautiful columns. They did not care about charm. They did not flatter anyone. Evan had opened the shared binder before the dinner, scrolled past the protocol, and opened the investor consent packet for 42 seconds. Not long enough to study it, long enough to know where Celia's name sat. Ellen asked, does Valan dispute that Mr. Whitcomb had access to the authority materials before challenging Ms. Raines? Outside counsel said no. Does Veylan dispute that the meeting protocol required document review before excluding a lead bakpar from substantive negotiation? No. Does Veylan dispute that Mr. Whitcomb communicated a version to the board chair that omitted the offered authorization and the seating decision? Counsel hesitated. Denise stared him down. No, he said finally. I do not dispute the omission. Celia wrote 3 words in her notebook. Omission is action. The labor operations advisor, a black woman named Tasha Bell, who had been introduced as a former warehouse director, leaned forward. I want to separate 2 issues. 1, Ms. Raines was denied her negotiated seat. 2, the same leadership instinct shows up in Veylan's customer complaints. Grant looked at her. What complaints? Tasha tapped the folder in front of her. During my board review last month, I flagged a pattern. When warehouse supervisors challenged routing errors, Veylan support marked several as user noncompliance before checking system logs. The workers were not investors. They were mostly floor leads at customer sites. Celia felt the room tilt, not dramatically, but like a shelf finally revealing it had been installed crooked. This was no longer only a dinner table insult. It was a habit wearing different clothes. Denise said, that review was scheduled for next quarter. It should not have been, Tasha replied. And tonight's record makes it harder to treat as a customer training issue. Grant rubbed his jaw. Are you saying our software misrouted loads and blamed floor staff? I'm saying the support classification pattern deserves immediate audit. Outside counsel shifted. We need to avoid expanding scope beyond the financing event. Celia looked at him. Financing event concerns governance risk. If the same leadership culture buries corrections from people with less power, that is governance risk. Tasha gave Celia one brief glance, not gratitude, more like recognition of a shared map, and turned to Denise. Tickets? 27 flagged, Tasha said, across 4 customers. Not all proven. Enough to test. Celia thought of Veylan's pitch deck, page 17, where Evan had boasted about reducing warehouse friction by removing human variance from routing decisions. She had underlined that phrase in diligence because human variance often meant human knowledge someone did not want to pay for. What is the proposed test? Celia asked. Ishta answered. A field verification with 1 customer willing to participate. Pull the routing decision logs, compare support classifications, interview floor leads with no sales team present, and confirm whether user noncompliance was applied before technical review. Grant exhaled. That will delay closing. Yes, Celia said. He looked at her, not defensively this time. Would Raines require it? Celia looked at the screen where Evan's 42-second access still glowed in a row of data. Then she looked through the glass wall at Veylan employees moving between desks, people whose jobs depended on leaders telling the truth before the truth became expensive. I would require a limited field test before funds release, she said. Not a fishing expedition. 1 customer. 48 hours. Independent oversight. Findings reported to the board and financing parties. Denise nodded slowly. That is reasonable. Outside counsel did not like it, which did not make it wrong. Maya raised her hand slightly, then seemed embarrassed by the gesture. Denise said, go ahead. Maya opened Binder 3, not to the protocol this time, but to a supplemental diligence request. There is 1 customer already cleared for operational observation under the pilot agreement, Harborline Foods. They have a night shift tonight and a floor lead who filed 2 of the challenge tickets. Tasha turned a page. Name? Maya checked the document. Andre Fields. Celia felt the night take on motion again. Not another meeting, a place, a worker, a log that could be tested where the software touched concrete. Grant looked at Celia. Will you attend? She thought of her mother's sink, the clean bracket, the small relief of fixing a sound instead of arguing about whether it existed. Yes, Celia said, but not as the star of a rescue mission, as an observer. Denise approved the field verification before anyone could sand it down. At 7:30 p.m., they would meet at Harborline Foods, pull the logs, and listen before classifying anything. Olga closed Binder 3 with both hands. This time, the folder did not feel like a burden she was holding alone. Harborline Foods ran its night shift under fluorescent lights that made every surface look a little tired. The warehouse sat behind a chain-link fence south of the harbor, where refrigerated trailers lined up like dull white blocks against the loading bays. Celia arrived at 7:18 p.m. with Ellen Park and Tasha Bell. Grant came in a separate car with outside counsel. No one brought Evan. Denise had made that clear in the calendar notice. Founder participation deferred pending board review. Inside, cold air moved across the dock in steady sheets. Forklifts beeped in reverse. Plastic curtains slapped softly as workers pushed loaded pallets through the cooler entrance. The place smelled of cardboard, diesel, and oranges from a split produce case near Bay 6. Celia stood near the safety line, with a visitor vest over her blazer, and watched the routing board update in green, yellow, and red. This was where Valon's software stopped being a deck. A bad route here meant spoiled food, missed store deliveries, overtime for people who did not set the algorithm, and blame passed down to the person closest to the noise. Andre Fields met them beside the dispatch cage. He was a broad-shouldered black man in his late 30s with a trimmed beard, thermal gloves tucked into his back pocket, and a barcode scanner clipped to his belt. His badge read floor lead. His face said he had already decided nobody in a vest was neutral until proven otherwise. View group, he asked. Tasha stepped forward first. Tasha Bell, Board Operations Advisor for Valon. This is Celia Rains from Rains Capital, Grant Sellers from Valon Finance, Ellen Park from Mezzanine Counsel, and Independent Counsel. Andre looked at the line of them. Hey, that is a lot of titles for 2 bad tickets. Then we should be efficient, Celia said. His eyes moved to her. Something in his posture changed when he heard no performance in the answer. You paying for the software? Not unless it tells the truth. Andre almost smiled. Then come see Bay 4. They followed him past stacked pallets and a wall clock with a cracked plastic face. A night supervisor named Rosa unlocked a small office overlooking the dock. 2 monitors showed Valon's routing dashboard. Andre pulled up the first disputed ticket dated 11 days earlier. The support classification read user non-compliance. Floor lead failed to scan priority override. Andre did not touch the keyboard after opening it. That line right there cost my team a written warning. Grant leaned closer. The system says the override was available. It was available at 8:03, Andre said. The truck sealed at 7:51. Tasha looked up. Show the dispatch timeline. Andre pointed to Rosa, who clicked into Harborline's local record. Warehouse management system showed trailer 18 sealed 12 minutes before Valon's priority override appeared. The floor team could not scan an instruction that had not existed yet. Outside counsel asked, could the seal time be wrong? Rosa's eyes narrowed. Not unless the dock camera, guard gate, and driver tablet are all wrong together. Ellen wrote that down. Celia watched Grant's face as the timestamps aligned. He did not look defensive. Now he looked sick. There were kinds of wrongdoing that announced themselves with shouting, and there were kinds that sat quietly inside drop-down menus. User non-compliance, customer training issue, floor error. Small phrases that moved cost away from the system and onto the people with hourly badges. Andre opened the second ticket. This one is worse. The dashboard showed a route correction at 9:14 p.m. after 2 pallets of dairy had been assigned to a dry trailer. Andre had flagged the temperature conflict. Support closed the ticket as user selected wrong load profile. Rosa clicked into the scanner history. Andre had selected refrigerated load twice. The Valon dashboard had translated the second scan into dry freight after a sync delay. Isha asked, can we export both logs? Rosa looked at Andre. Andre said export them. That permission mattered. Celia was glad Tasha had asked him, not just the company. People talked about data ownership in boardrooms as if the people named by the data were furniture. Grant turned to independent counsel. We need engineering to preserve the sync layer. Tonight, Tasha said. Grant nodded. Tonight. Celia looked through the office window at the dock workers moving under cold light. One young man slapped his gloved hands together for warmth before guiding a pallet jack into place. Another checked a manifest with his lips moving silently over each line. They were not props in Evan's labor dignity slide. They were the people who absorbed elegant mistakes. Andre watched Celia watching them. You know what bothered me most? What? Not the warning. I've had warnings. It was the support note. Recommend retraining floor lead on basic scan discipline. Basic. He laughed without humor. I trained half this doc. Celia felt that sentence settle into a different part of the case. The same pattern, different table. A person with authority in practice made invisible by a system that preferred a cleaner story. She turned to Grant. This is now a condition of any release. Grant did not ask what she meant. Celia stated it anyway, because records mattered most when everyone thought the meaning was obvious. will not release funds until VLAN reclassifies these tickets pending technical review, removes disciplinary reliance on disputed software classifications, and conducts an audited sample of all user non-compliance closures tied to timing conflicts. Outside counsel started to speak, then stopped when Denise's name lit up on Grant's phone. Grant answered on speaker with Andre's permission. Denise listened as Tasha summarized the timestamps. When Tasha finished, the warehouse noise filled the phone line for 2 full breaths. Then Denise said, "Preserve the logs. Suspend reliance on all similar classifications until reviewed. Grant, notify customer success tonight. Incha, draft the audit scope. Ms. Rains, your hold remains understood." Andre looked at the phone, then at Celia. "So it was not just us." "No," Celia said. "And that does not make it better." He nodded once, accepting the answer because it did not try to shine anything. As they left the dispatch office, Celia saw Maya standing near the visitor entrance with a VLAN attorney binder 3 against her chest. She had come to deliver the shared protocol packet for the field file, but her eyes were on Andre now, on the dock, on the workers whose warnings had been hiding inside the same culture that had nearly swallowed her own. Maya walked over and handed Tasha the packet. "The board asked me to bring the classification policy, too." Tasha opened it and found a yellow sticky note on the disputed section. Maya said, "That part was revised 2 months ago." Evan approved the language. The forklifts kept moving behind her. This time, the evidence was not sitting in a private dining room. It was breathing cold air on a warehouse floor, attached to names, warnings, and work that had never been basic. The audit scope went live before midnight, and by morning VLAN's clean customer story had begun to fray. Not publicly, and not yet. There were no headlines, no viral clips, no grand collapse that let everyone pretend justice had a soundtrack. There was a spreadsheet Denise Halpern ordered locked into the board portal, a ticket export from customer success, and 27 disputed closures sorted by timestamp conflict, role of the complainant, and whether disciplinary language had been sent to the customer. Celia read it from a small conference room at Rains Capital, with a paper cup of coffee cooling beside her laptop. She had gone home for 3 hours, showered, changed into a charcoal suit, and found a sliver of plumber's tape still stuck to the cuff of yesterday's blouse. She put it in her desk drawer instead of throwing it away. Some reminders earned their space. Across the table, Richard reviewed the Harbor Line logs with a pencil, because he trusted graphite more than most annotation tools. Ellen Park joined by video. Tasha Bell was on the screen from VLAN's office. Her background blurred, but her voice crisp with the fatigue of someone who had been awake long enough to stop decorating bad news. Grant was there too, seated beside outside counsel. Evan was not. "The sample confirms at least 9 timing conflicts," Tasha said. 4 are clear system-side delays. 3 need engineering review. 2 involve customer-side errors but were still closed with language harsher than the facts supported. Richard tapped his pencil once. "Were the floor leads notified before the classifications went to customer management?" "No," Grant said. "The support notes went directly into monthly performance summaries." Celia looked at him. "So workers were disciplined based on unverified software interpretations." Outside counsel said, "Some cases, the customer made the disciplinary decision based on what VLAN gave them." He did not answer. Ellen leaned toward her camera. "For financing purposes, the issue is not just product accuracy. It is whether management knew the classification process could shift blame and failed to correct it." Tasha opened another document. That is where the policy revision matters. Celia sat straighter. The document on screen was plain. 2 pages marked customer support escalation language. Maya's sticky note from the warehouse had pointed to Section 4, approved 2 months earlier. Before the revision, support agents were required to mark unresolved timing conflicts as pending technical review. After the revision, they could classify certain conflicts as user noncompliance when the system displayed an available corrective action, even if local records had not yet been compared. Richard made a sound under his breath. "That is how they got Andre." "Yes," Tasha said. "The override existed in VLAN's system. It just existed too late to help him." Grant's face had the gray cast of a man watching numbers become people. Evan pushed that revision after customer churn warnings. He said pending technical review made the product look unstable. "Who signed off?" Celia asked. Grant looked down. Evan approved. Customer success implemented. Legal marked it acceptable if customers retained appeal rights. Did workers have appeal rights? No, customers did. There was the hinge. Celia felt it with a clarity that made her tired. The system allowed companies to appeal damage to service metrics. It did not allow Andre Fields to appeal damage to his name. Ellen said, that creates a foreseeable fairness problem. Outside counsel rubbed the bridge of his nose. We are prepared to recommend immediate suspension of Section 4, reclassification of affected tickets, customer notices, and an employee impact review where disciplinary summaries referenced Valon classifications. Celia waited. Grant looked at her. And witness protection for Maya remains in place. That was not extra, Celia said. Hey, that was the floor. He nodded. Understood. Denise joined 5 minutes late, already briefed, already moving. We need a decision. The board can either try to preserve Friday's financing on amended conditions, it can pause the transaction for a full governance review and risk losing the round. No one rushed into the space she left. Celia thought of Valon's employees behind the glass, the support team who had not written the policy, engineers who might have flagged the sync delay if anyone had made that safe, the warehouse floor, leads whose warnings had been filed as basic discipline. She also thought of Evan's hand on her chair, the side seat by the wall, the ease with which he had called exclusion a process concern. She was not there to destroy a company because its CEO had insulted her. She was not there to rescue one by pretending the insult was separate from the machinery around it. Rains will not close this week, she said. Grant's shoulders dropped, though he must have expected it. Celia continued. But we will keep the commitment under conditional hold for 14 days instead of withdrawing it today. Denise looked at her carefully. Conditions? Evan remains removed from transaction authority pending investigation. Section 4 is suspended immediately. Valon sends written corrections to every customer whose performance summary included disputed classifications. Any worker discipline tied to those classifications must be flagged for customer review. Engineering runs the sync delay audit with board oversight. Maya's protection is entered into the minutes. Andre Fields and other affected floor leads are not used as marketing. Tasha's mouth curved slightly at that last one, not quite a smile. Outside counsel typed quickly. And if those conditions are met, then we reopen funding approval. Not automatic release, reopen, Denise nodded. That is a hard path, but it is a path. Grant looked toward his counsel, then back at Celia. I can work with that. Before Celia could answer, the conference room door at Rains opened without a knock. Your partners, Alina Mercer, stepped in with a phone in her hand and anger held too neatly behind her eyes. Celia, Alina said, we have a problem. Celia muted the video. What kind? Alina placed the phone on the table. On the screen was an email forwarded from a limited partner at a pension fund. No attachment, just a paragraph dressed as concern. We are hearing Rains Capital may have destabilized a late-stage software financing over a personal seating dispute. Please advise whether governance judgment remains sound. Celia read it once. Then again. Richard saw her face and leaned back from the harbor line logs. Story had left the room at last. It had found a cleaner hallway. Celia unmuted the call. Denise, preserve external communications too. Denise's expression changed. What happened? Celia looked at the email, at the phrase personal seating dispute, and felt the old anger return, quieter now and better aim. And someone is shopping Evan's version outside the company, she said. Now the review includes who wants that lie to survive. By noon, the leak had a shape. It had not come from a reporter, a customer, or someone at the Marrow House who enjoyed watching rich people damage each other over untouched oysters. It came through a quieter channel, the one built for reputations to travel without fingerprints. A venture partner at North Star Bridge had called one of Rains Capital's limited partners, expressing concern that Celia had made a late-stage financing personal and might be using governance rights to punish a founder during negotiations. North Star Bridge was not in the deal. That made it worse. Celia sat in the same conference room with Alina, Richard, and Rains Capital's general counsel, Naomi Fisk, while Denise stayed on video from Valon. The Harbor Line audit documents were still open on one screen. The forwarded pension email sat on another. Two wrong stories now stood side by side. Andre Fields as a careless floor lead, Celia Rains as an offended investor who could not handle a seating mistake. Different rooms, same machine. Naomi read from her notes. We need to be precise. The external statement does not mention race. It does not mention the chair. It reframes the hold as temperament. That is usually the point, Alina said. Celia had worked with Alina for 9 years. Alina was white, wealthy, and blunt enough to make enemies in rooms that expected women to soften bad news. She had also once told Celia during a hostile diligence call that she should let it go until the wire clears. Celia had not forgotten. Alina had apologized 6 months later without being prompted, which mattered more than never being wrong. Denise leaned toward her camera. "We are checking Evan's communications." Board counsel found he contacted 2 external industry advisors last night after the freeze. Was Northstar one of them? Naomi asked. Not directly, but one advisor has a current consulting arrangement with Northstar. Richard muttered, laundered concern. Celia looked at the forwarded email again. Governance judgment remains sound. Such smooth language. Nobody had to call her angry when they could call her judgment uncertain. Nobody had to say she did not belong at the table when they could say she had destabilized it. Alina folded her arms. "We should withdraw. Today. Put out a statement that Rains will not invest in companies that retaliate through reputation channels. That may be satisfying," Naomi said. It may also abandon the workers affected by the classification policy and allow Evan to claim you killed the company to hide a thin case. I am not suggesting a tweet storm. No one used the word tweet storm. You used your lawyer voice. This is my only voice. For the first time that day, Celia almost laughed. It left her as a breath instead. The small absurdity helped. Her anger had been disciplined for so long it sometimes forgot to leave space for anything else. Denise said, "The board is prepared to issue a written correction to financing parties and all board observers by end of day. We can also notify Velan employees that Section 4 is suspended and that no retaliation will be tolerated." Not mention Rains as the reason, Celia said. Denise paused. "Why?" "Because then every employee who already fears Evans' camp will see the correction as investor pressure. Make it a board governance action tied to the review." Tasha, listening from another Velan office, nodded on screen. "That will land better internally." Alina looked at Celia. "And externally?" Celia did not answer immediately. Her phone showed a missed call from Malik and a photo from her mother. The repaired sink, dry underneath, with a handwritten note taped to the cabinet. No bucket governance. Celia saved the image without explaining to anyone why her eyes had softened. And she turned back to the room. "Externally, we respond with process. Not emotion, not biography. Naomi, draft a notice to our limited partners. Funding remains under conditional hold because of verified governance concerns, document preservation, customer impact review, and board-led corrective actions. No personal dispute language, no defensive essay." Naomi nodded. "And Northstar? We do not accuse what we cannot prove." Alina frowned. "Celia, we preserve. Ask Velan Board Counsel to include external advisor communications. We ask our LP to identify who contacted them and when. We do not become the people we are documenting." Richard looked at her, approval quiet in his eyes. The decision cost her something. She could feel it. There were moments when dignity looked too much like restraint to outsiders, and restraint looked too much like permission to the people causing harm. But there was a difference between moving slowly and moving by record. Celia had chosen the second. At 3:40 p.m., Denise issued the first board correction. It went to directors, observers, and financing parties. It stated that Celia Rains had been the authorized lead representative, that a communication suggesting she sought unilateral control was inaccurate, that closing authority had been reassigned, and that all transaction documents and related communications were preserved under board order. At 4:15, Velan suspended Section 4. At 4:50, Harborline Foods received notice that Andre Fields' warnings were under review and could not be relied upon for discipline until the audit closed. Andre texted Tasha one sentence which Tasha forwarded with his permission. "Tell them basic scan discipline says thank you." Celia read it twice. She did smile then, not because the work was finished, but because one false label had been loosened from one person's name. At 5:30, Grant called. His voice sounded scraped raw. "Evan has offered to resign as CEO if the board lets him remain a strategic advisor." Denise was already on the line. "The board has not accepted." Celia looked across the table at Alina, Naomi, and Richard. Everyone understood the offer. Evan wanted to step away from the title and keep a corridor back to power. "What does the evidence support?" Celia asked. Denise answered, "Removal from executive authority. Full investigation before any advisory role." correction of external statements, customer remediation, governance controls. Then that is the condition, Celia said. Grant exhaled. We will fight it. Then he can do that without our money released. By evening, the first real consequence had taken form. Evan was removed from closing authority. Section 4 was suspended. Maya's protection sat in the minutes. Andre's warning was frozen. Haynes's LPs had the corrected notice before the rumor hardened. The funding had not returned, but the lie no longer had the room to itself. The ninth part of the fight began with repair, which was slower than punishment and much less photogenic. Velan sent customer notices the next morning under Denise Halpern's signature. Not a press release, not an apology wrapped in brand language. 14 letters, each tied to a specific account, each naming the suspended support classification and asking customers to pause disciplinary reliance on affected performance summaries until the audit closed. Harborline Foods received the first one at 8:12 a.m. Andre Fields called Tasha Bell 10 minutes later from the dispatch cage. He actually put it in writing, he said. Tasha had him on speaker with Celia's permission. Celia stood in Rain's Capital's kitchenette, pouring coffee she did not want, still wearing the same charcoal suit from the day before. Her reflection in the microwave door looked like somebody who had slept inside a spreadsheet. Tasha said, "They put the disputed ticket numbers in writing too." Andre gave a low whistle. Isa is walking it to HR now. I wish I could see my supervisor's face. Do not celebrate in front of him, Tasha said. I am a professional. Celia heard someone shout over a forklift beep in the background. Andre covered the phone and shouted back, Bay 3 after the dry load clears. Then he returned, a professional with timing. For the first time since Marrow House, Celia laughed fully. It startled her enough that she turned toward the window. Outside, downtown Baltimore moved under a hard morning sun, glass towers and old brick sharing the same narrow streets without agreeing on much. Andre's warning was not erased yet. Maya's career was not safe forever. Evan had not accepted the board's conditions. But one worker could walk into HR with a document that said the machine might have been wrong. That was not everything, it was measurable. By noon, Velan held an internal all-hands call. Celia did not attend. He had requested that. Employees needed to hear from their board, not from the investor whose money had forced the issue into daylight. Denise spoke for 11 minutes. Naomi received the transcript afterward. Celia read it at her desk with Richard across from her and Alina pacing near the bookshelves. The company had suspended Section 4. Customer impact review had begun. No employee would be retaliated against for preserving or identifying records. Evan Whitcomb was on administrative leave from executive duties pending investigation. Grant Sellers would manage operating continuity with board oversight. Denise did not mention the chair. She did not mention Celia's race. She did not need to. The facts were heavy enough without decoration. Alina stopped pacing. It is too clean. Celia looked up. Meaning? Meaning he gets leave, lawyers get language, the board gets to say controls failed. Where does the insult go? Richard rested his pencil on the table. Into the pattern, if we are careful. I am tired of careful. Celia understood. She was tired too. Tired of translating humiliation into governance terms before anyone would treat it as real. Tired of knowing that if she named the insult too plainly, someone would call it personal, and if she did not name it, someone would call it resolved. It goes where it can do work, Celia said. Alina shook her head. That sounds like something you say when you are swallowing glass. Maybe. The admission softened the room. Alina sat down. At 2 p.m., Maya joined a protected witness interview with board counsel. She described the dinner without drama. The seating card, the side chair request, Evan's refusal to review the authorization, his warning when she identified the shared binder, his later instruction through a chief of staff not to discuss investor theatrics with anyone. She also disclosed something new. 2 weeks earlier, while preparing closing binders, she had flagged that Section 4 might create risk for frontline workers because customer appeals did not necessarily reach the employees named in support notes. What happened to that flag? Board counsel asked. Maya looked down at her hands. It was moved to post-close product review. By whom? Evan. Celia read the summary in silence. That was the painful truth behind the clean lines of the audit. Velan had been warned before the dinner. Not by a partner, not by a board member, not by a person with enough authority to make the warning comfortable, by Maya, who had seen the binder, the policy, the small procedural gap through which people like Andre fell. Celia closed the summary and sat with that for a moment. At 4:30, she called Maya directly with counsel present. "I read your interview summary." Maya's voice was guarded. "Yeah, you saw the issue before any of us. I saw a possible issue. You named it. I put it in a comment. That counts." Maya was quiet long enough that Celia heard paper shifting on her end. It did not feel like it counted. Celia looked at the piece of plumber's tape in her open drawer. A lot of important things do not feel important when the first person ignores them. Maya let out a small breath. "Are you still keeping the hold?" "Yes." "Good." The answer surprised Celia. "That may make your life harder." "It is already harder," Maya said. At least this way there is a reason." By evening, the board made its decision. Evan would remain on administrative leave. His resignation as CEO would be accepted only if it included no advisory role, no access to transaction communications, and a cooperation requirement for the external investigation. Customer remediation would continue under Tasha's oversight. Grant would stay interim transaction lead. His protected status would extend through the investigation and 90 days beyond closing, whether or not Raines invested. Denise called Celia after the vote. "We can meet your conditions within 14 days. Can you keep them after the money arrives? That is the question, isn't it?" Celia appreciated that she did not pretend otherwise. That night, Celia stopped at her mother's house with takeout, as promised 2 days late. The kitchen sink stayed quiet, while Gloria unpacked containers and Malik complained that nobody respected his plumbing leadership. Celia stood at the cabinet and listened for the knock that did not come. Her mother touched her sleeve. "Did you fix your other pipe?" Celia thought of Evan, Maya, Andre, Denise, Grant, all the joints now exposed. "We found where it was leaking," she said. Gloria nodded as if that was answer enough for one night. 14 days later, the $180 million did not vanish back into the room with a flourish. It returned by conditions, signatures, and people checking boxes that now had names attached to them. Vaillan's board accepted Evan Whitcomb's resignation without an advisory role. His separation agreement required cooperation with the external investigation and barred contact with transaction witnesses. The written correction went to every board observer, financing party, and external advisor who had received or repeated the false version of the dinner. It did not call the harm a misunderstanding. It stated that Celia Raines had been the authorized lead representative, that her authority had been available for verification, and that the company failed to follow its own protocol before excluding her from equal participation. Section 4 was not merely suspended. It was rewritten. Support agents could no longer classify timing conflicts as user non-compliance until local records, system logs, and customer-side timestamps were compared. Any classification that could affect worker discipline had to include a notice that the named employee or floor lead could provide context through the customer's process. Tasha Bell took temporary oversight of customer impact review, and Harborline Foods received the first corrected summary. Andre Fields' warning was removed from his file. 2 other floor leads had written warnings converted to pending review, and one refrigerated load dispute led Vaillan Engineering to find a sync delay bug in the same module Evan had wanted protected from ugly language. The bug had no opinion about race, rank, or who sounded professional. The people who ignored its consequences had made those choices. Maya Dorsey stayed on the transaction team under protected status. When the final minutes were circulated, her name appeared not as a problem to manage, but as a source of accurate record preservation. Celia read that sentence twice before signing her own approval. The financing did not close on the original terms. Raines Capital kept the $180 million commitment, but the final documents added a board-level customer fairness committee, an annual audit of support classifications, and a covenant requiring notification if executive leadership attempted to retaliate against record custodians or witnesses. Grant remained interim transaction lead through closing. Denise became executive chair for the first year after the round. At the signing session, no one used the Marrow House. They met in Vaillan's loading bay conference room, with the routing map glowing on the brick wall and a plate of grocery store sandwiches on the credenza. Billy appreciated the lack of ceremony. She signed where Naomi pointed, initialed the covenant writer, and handed the pen to Grant. Grant looked at it before taking it. "I should have spoken sooner that night." "Yes," Celia said. He nodded once. I'm sorry. She studied him for a moment. An apology could be useful without being complete. Then keep speaking when I'm not in the room. He accepted that as the condition it was. Maya passed Celia a closing binder after the last signature. Final copy. Label confirmed. Celia smiled. You checked the label? Twice. Good. Maya hesitated. I'm applying for a governance fellowship next spring. Tasha said she would write a recommendation. She should, Celia said. So will I, if you want one. Maya's eyes lowered, then lifted again. Do. After the signing, Celia drove to Harborline with Tasha, not for a victory lap, but because Andre had asked them to see the corrected routing test. On the dock, he scanned a refrigerated load, waited for the screen, and watched the override appear before the seal time. The system gave a clean beep. No warning, no false note, no basic discipline attached to work already done right. Andre held up the scanner. That sound is better than an apology. It travels farther, Tasha said. That evening, Celia stopped at her mother's house with the final binder in her bag and takeout cooling on the passenger seat. Gloria had left the cabinet under the sink open, showing the dry pipe like proof of a small domestic miracle. Malik had taped a note beside it. Still no bucket governance. Celia stood in the kitchen and laughed before she could stop herself. Her mother came in behind her. You get your seat? Celia thought about the table, the hold, the warehouse, the corrections, and the fact that justice had arrived as work, not thunder. Yes, she said. And a few other people did too. Later, after dinner, her phone buzzed with a message from Tasha. One of the other flagged customers had asked for help reviewing a different vendor's discipline reports. Not Valon. Not the same software. Same habit of blaming the nearest worker before checking the record. Celia looked at the message, then at the quiet sink, then at the binder on her mother's table. She did not answer right away. She saved the number, slid the phone beside the dry cabinet, and let the kitchen hold its silence a little longer.